The widow of Okagbo. The village of Okagbo sat at the foot of a hill, surrounded by thick forests and endless streams. The people were simple farmers and traders, content with their quiet lives. But one woman in the village, Adoni, carried a sadness that no one could ignore. Adoni was a widow. Her husband, Kolopo, had died 5 years ago under mysterious circumstances. They had been returning from the farm one evening when he collapsed, clutching his chest. By the time help came, Kolopo was gone. Since then, Adoni had lived alone in the small mud house they had built together, raising their only son, Deli, who was now 7 years old. People whispered about her. She's cursed, some said. Maybe she's the one who killed her husband, others speculated. Adoni ignored them. Her only focus was her son, who had his father's bright eyes and curious spirit. The stranger in the night. One evening, as Adoni prepared to sleep, she heard a knock on her door. It was unusual, nobody visited her at night. She hesitated but eventually opened the door to find a man standing in the darkness. He was tall and lean, with a scar running down his left cheek. He looked like he had traveled far, his clothes dusty and torn. "Good evening, madam," he said, his voice deep but calm. "I am Ajola, a traveler. I need a place to rest for the night." Adoni hesitated. It was dangerous to let strangers into one's home, but something about the man's eyes, tired but kind, made her nod. "You can sleep in the corner," she said, pointing to a mat. "Thank you," Ajola replied, bowing slightly. That night, Adoni stayed awake, watching the stranger from the corner of her eye. She didn't know why, but his presence unsettled her. The strange gift. The next morning, Ajola thanked her and prepared to leave. But before he did, he handed her a small leather pouch. "This is for your kindness," he said. "What is it?" Adoni asked, eyeing the pouch suspiciously. "Open it when you need help the most," he said cryptically, then disappeared down the road. Adoni placed the pouch on a shelf and tried to forget about it. But her mind kept returning to the stranger and his strange words. Trouble brews. Months passed, and life in Okagbo continued as usual. Adoni sold yams and plantains at the market to make ends meet. Deli attended the village school and played with his friends. But one day, trouble came to Okagbo. A group of men arrived, claiming to be tax collectors from the distant king. They demanded payment from every household, threatening to burn down homes if anyone refused. When they reached Adoni's house, she pleaded with them. "I'm a widow," she said. "I have nothing to give." The leader of the group, a burly man with a cruel smile, sneered at her. "Widow or not, you must pay," he said. "We'll return in 3 days. If you don't have the money, we'll take your son instead." Adoni's heart froze. The pouch. That night, as Deli slept beside her, Adoni remembered the leather pouch. Desperate, she took it down from the shelf and opened it. Inside was a small black stone, smooth and cold to the touch. "What is this supposed to do?" she muttered. But as she held it, she felt a strange warmth spread through her palm. Suddenly, she heard a voice, soft, like a whisper in the wind. "Speak your wish," the voice said. Adoni's heart raced. Was she dreaming? But the stone glowed faintly in her hand, and she knew it was real. "I wish to protect my son," she said, her voice trembling. The stone stopped glowing, and the warmth disappeared. Unsure of what to expect, Adoni placed the stone back in the pouch and waited. A visitor at dawn. The next morning, just as the sun rose, a woman appeared at Adoni's door. She was old, with a hunched back and piercing eyes. "I heard you need help," the woman said. "Who are you?" Adoni asked, confused. "Call me Aya Agba," the woman replied. "I know about the men who threatened you. They are not tax collectors, they are thieves." But they are dangerous. We must be clever to stop them. Adoni stared at the old woman, unsure of what to believe. But she had no other options, so she nodded. The plan. Aya Agba told Adoni to gather certain items, red cloth, cowries, and palm oil. Together, they created something that looked like a shrine and placed it at the entrance to the village. When the men return, they will see this and think the gods are angry with them, Aya Agba explained. Superstition is their weakness. Adoni was skeptical, but she did as the old woman instructed. The confrontation. On the third day, the men returned, their voices loud and arrogant as they demanded their money. But when they saw the shrine, they stopped in their tracks. What is this? Their leader barked, but his voice wavered. This is a warning from the gods, Aya Agba said, stepping forward. Her voice was strong, almost otherworldly. If you harm anyone in this village, you will face their wrath. The men hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. They were tough, but even tough men feared the unseen. The leader spat on the ground. We don't believe in this nonsense. But just as he said those words, a gust of wind swept through the village, knocking over pots and scattering leaves. The men looked at each other, their bravado crumbling. It's a sign, one of them shouted. Without another word, they turned and fled, leaving the villagers in stunned silence. The revelation. As the villagers celebrated their victory, Adoni turned to thank Aya Agba. But the old woman was gone. In her place was the leather pouch, now empty. Adoni realized then that the stranger, the stone, and Aya Agba were connected. Perhaps the gods had sent them to protect her and her son. A new beginning. From that day, the people of Okagbo treated Adoni with respect. No longer did they whisper about curses or blame her for her husband's death. They saw her as a woman of courage, a protector of the village. Adoni continued to live a quiet life, raising Deli and sharing her story with him. She never saw Ajola or Aya Agba again, but she often thought of them with gratitude. And so, the widow of Okagbo became a symbol of strength and resilience, a tale but reminder that even in the darkest times, help can come from the most unexpected places.